I'm gonna do something a little bit thrifty today. I found this dress at the thrift store. It is brand new, it's J. Crew, but I'm not a huge fan of how the bodice looks. I absolutely love this fabric and the color, so I am going to rework this dress. First, I started off by chopping off the bodice, and I cut out the zipper because I wanted to use the zipper again once the dress was finished. Then I proceeded to make my own pattern. I have a video, see the link below, on how I actually do this, so I'm not gonna go into a lot of depth, but I basically just draped my thing on the fabric and then traced it onto a piece of paper. Then I cut the sleeves out of the bodice and cut the front bodice off and separated it from the back and pressed all my pieces flat so that I could actually lay it out and start cutting out my new bodice pieces. Now you'll notice it doesn't quite fit, but I'll show you once I cut it out. I'm going to pin that piece back and I'm going to cut a straight edge where that curve is so I can sew another piece on there. So I took a scrap piece of the neckline that was left over, straightened off the edge, and then I sewed it onto that side, and then I pressed it open so it wouldn't be such a bulky, obvious spot. Then I took the piece and cut it out and finished it all together. Then I cut out the back pieces. I have the back and the front pieces. And then I just proceeded to make the bodice. I'm not going into a lot of detail here, but if you want to see how I made the bodice, check out my video below. And here I am measuring the straps from the front to the back as I did in the video below. Then I used the sleeves to actually cut out my straps. They're very thin, so I cut them out at 7/8 of an inch. And then I folded that in half with the iron. Then I opened that up and folded one side to the middle, as you can see, and I took the other side and folded that to the middle as well. Then I folded it in half again, so everything is encased in there. Then I stitched the edge down, and then I stitched them to the bodice where they needed to be stitched and evened them out on both sides. There it is without the lining attached. Now I'm attaching the lining and using all the methods that are in my videos. See my videos on necklines. Then I pressed the neckline down after I'd stitched on the side of the lining, and it looked amazing. It was a perfectly smooth edge. Super happy with how it looked. I want to put a zipper down the back. However, there's no seam here to put the zipper in the back. So I'm literally just gonna cut down here and put a seam in there. Super easy, guys. Sounds complicated, but it actually isn't that bad. So I measured from side seam to side seam to find the middle of it, and then I cut all the way down the middle where I marked the pins. Then I measured how long my zipper is supposed to go all the way down, and then I decided to sew just the outer layer, not the lining in with it. Then I pressed it open, and you'll see I came to a point at the end. As you can see, I sewed all the way down here, and then I tapered it off down to a point. And on the underside, there is the ruffle. And you can see I tapered it off so I could come to a point right where that ruffle is. And I didn't include the ruffle in there, but it just completely hides it and I don't have to take the ruffle out. I only sewed the top layer together, right? And this is where my zipper is gonna go right in here. Well, I have my lining and I'm gonna sew this separately, just like I just did. Or with the lining, I did cut all the way through because the lining was not a part of the ruffle. So I am literally just gonna sew these together like this. So I sewed it together, now I'm pressing it open and left room for the zipper. Then I added gathering stitches to just the outer layer. One thing I'm gonna say here is I do not like to gather my linings and my outer layer together because it gives a more bulky gathered look. So that's why I'm separating both of the layers. So I take my bodice off the mannequin and I'm gathering my gathering stitches and I'm basically just pinning it to the bodice, but not including any of the linings, not in the bodice either, and matching side seams, pinning the gathers to the bodice. Then I flip it inside out with those pins in, and I'm gonna actually pleat the lining and pin that to all the layers instead of gathering it, because then it'll be a lot flatter all the way around the dress and not make us look pregnant. Now I'm adding it to the ironing board and I'm pressing down the bodice with the seam facing up, and I flip it inside out again, and I'm folding the lining to go be hand stitched down to the bodice all the way around the waistline. And voila, it's done. I did an invisible zipper. See video below on how I do my invisible zippers, but I'm super pleased with how it looks. And yeah, I'm sold on this method. I am really pleased with it. Adios everyone, hit that subscribe button and I will see you next time.